Okay.
Sorry.
So, as long as we're all for everyone to watch afterwards, that's what I'm concerned about.
For you, right? Oh, hey everyone that's watching. Hey everyone that's watching. Sorry, just. Sure, I'll post the link to YouTube and IRC merch.
Okay.
So,
yeah, let's get started. Our Juju office on Eco. Hopefully, kind of hang out here on Hangouts and on IRC. Kind of field your questions about Juju. We'll take answers from IRC, and this is also a nice regular pulse of the schedule, so that if you or your company wants to use Juju, maybe you don't want to commit to like an exact charm school, and you just want to kind of listen along to see what worry charm schools, and it kind of brings back the whole status report thing. So we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different. We have Marco here, who's actually sprinting in Nuremberg with to tell us a bunch of cool stuff that is coming. Some topics. I kind of like to talk about Juju 123, which is our next release, and I just email scroll by a little while ago. Almost complete. I think
is in the proposed state, which means they're cut to find bugs and get them fixed.
Mm-hmm.
In the next couple of days, UAT ramping up. 1.3 adds a lot of for a bunch of other things as well. So things that we'll see at 23. First of all, the first available public actions are these very cool ways that you can have that you can describe repeatable tasks that you can have the user execute those with parameters. There's a way to get results back from that. So backing up things that you've been doing with Juju Run, or still in an easy, repeatable fashion, which is really great for the whole Juju as a service. Other things that we're getting are leader elections, at least the leader elections. This is by far one of the most requested features of Juju, is to have Juju itself as the orchestrator model this very complex, very required thing, and especially in hyperscale and scale up of choosing a leader. So forward for those charms that wish to make use of that feature, Juju won't just elect the leader for you. You have to request leadership. So in your hooks, simply say, and I wish I knew the command, but I'll make sure the docs are linked afterwards, that I wish to, basically all the units grab and say, I want to become a leader. You will assign a leader lease to one of those guys. And then once that unit will let me notified you are the leader, everyone else will be assigned. This is from there are a bunch of other hooks that you can model about what happens when a leader goes away, and periodically make sure that the leader is still active and alive.
Marco, so when the other charms will get notified of their leader, is it by IP address? Okay.
So yeah, so Chuck put some information in the sidebar, which I don't think gets copied over. So you have commands. So you have an is leader, which says if you are the leader. You have a leader get command, which allows you to get information, and there's a leader set, which allows the leader to send information to these units. So there's a communication channel now, much like the peer relation, but it's a that only the leader can write to, and all the other units can read from. There's also a leader elected hook and a leader settings change, a leader setting deposed hook, which fires whenever a leader has been removed from the pool. So these are all now new features that are landing in 123. That's just that's two of many features that have been landing. We'll see a bunch of initial support for additional features. The full list I don't have, but the changelog for 123 will be available at jujucharms.com/docs. Our documentation for that, and has a full rundown of that thing. So probably the two most exciting things that we can see landing in 123.
Something some people have been asking me about lately is CentOS support and support for other non-Ubuntu operating systems. Have the skinny down low on that?
I'm here in Nuremberg for this week here, sprinting with the Juju alongside the Juju core team. We also have a couple of guests from the community here with us, and one of those guests is actually Cloudbase, who did the initial Windows support for Juju, and they just a couple of hours ago landed the commit needed to enable CentOS support in Juju. So it exists now in trunk. We will probably see it come out in the 124 release, and so they've done as a community member in both charming as well as enabling support and some outside code review for core. They're really engaged. They're really awesome guys. It's been a lot of fun this last week chatting with them and such. But CentOS support by Cloudbase has been enabled and landed. It'll only be available for Maz and OpenStack for the first release, which is the same support that the Windows release has. They're and engaging with CentOS upstream to make sure that Cloud Init is available on all the clouds, so that you'll be able to deploy CentOS workloads the same way you deploy the same way you deploy Ubuntu workloads. Right, there is a little bit of an extra step that's required, but they will have documentation very soon for Windows and CentOS workloads in the docs. So those people who are interested in it and are using OpenStack and Maz will have that available in trunk, and Windows support is available now, and soon, hopefully soon, we'll get that in all public clouds.
Excellent. What else is going on then in core, other than leader election?
We've had a lot of great discussions about features that'll be coming in the next couple of months. I'd like to highlight a few features that we would see. I think we have initial support 123, but it's hidden away by default behind a development flag. But we'll probably see, 123, but we'll probably see coming in 124. The two biggest ones are networking and storage supports. So what's awesome about this is Juju's managing all your services, all your units, all your relations. You can now democratize what storage and how networking is mapped. So if you're deploying onto AWS, you could choose which volume type you want to use. Same with any other cloud, same with Azure, same with OpenStack. Maz of different disks, and networking as well. If you want to use VPC in Amazon, if you have a complicated isolation network in your Maz, all of that stuff will be able to be exposed to Charms, and Charms can make use of that inside of Juju and 124. So those are some really that have been requested quite often by users, and it's nice to see those finally getting real true support, and the implementation for them are very elegant, very beautiful, and very easy to use from both a charming standpoint as well as an operator managing and deploying Juju.
Okay, sorry, I'm just kind of updating all the Ubuntu on Air stuff to get all the people to this right video. So out of all of these, which ones have you started to use the most? I mean, I know you're really into actions. Leader election probably takes you a little while to like get spun up on that, but like, what are the easiest ones to kind of just people can immediately take advantage of? And I'm really kind of leaning towards actions on this one, right?
Your author's needs. We also have a couple of charmers here with us at the sprint, and it's interesting because I personally love actions. I'm in love with actions. It's true, but some of the charms, especially some of the authors who write the more involved database charms, they're really on storage, and they've been adding that into their charms. So you can model, I want my cache to be. They basically separate out the logic. This is where the database should be stored. Well, I'm sorry. So let me back up. So the storage feature especially is you just define the different mount points that you want to expose. I want to expose where my caching data goes, where my actual real data goes, where my logs go. And what happens when the user deploys a charm, they have the option to say, I want to set the storage for cache to be an EBS volume that's 10 gigs. I want to set my SSD-backed EBS volume for my data. I want to give that 100 gigs. So the charm author has no idea what the actual storage will be. The user chooses it. They just say, declare in the charm that I'm going to need to be able to get these file system mount points. And if the operator doesn't specify anything, they'll just get a regular directory in the file system. So charms will always work out of the box, whether or not the user selects storage, but the user now has the option to make smarter decisions about how they place their charms. So storage has actually been one we've seen a lot of authors, especially ones that model a lot of database charms in particular, have been really taking hold, just dropping in a real quick storage YAML file and updating a hooks with some new commands. So it's really cool to see that process and see them adopting these features. I still think actions are the coolest, but storage is definitely well.
Okay, we had a question if charms can also provide their own storage. How does that kind of work?
The system, like the Ceph charm, I think was an example that was talked about.
So I'm not sure if it's the extent of the details of that, but I do know that if you're using, for instance, an OpenStack that has Cinder backed with Ceph, you'll be able to tap into either Cinder or Ceph. But I think that's because it's exposed in the OpenStack API. I'm not sure if it's exposed in the charm level, but I could be wrong, and you probably are right. Which is also another very exciting thing, where you can start deploying things like Ceph or other file systems that can just be modeled into your charm, so you can even, without having to know or use any cloud storage as well. And those charms themselves can then request block devices or other file systems to model their storage on top of their pools on top of it.
So that kind of leads to a question I've been having here a little bit. So for example, for services that can utilize shared storage, like for example the WordPress one, right, where you want all the pictures, blog posts to be synced across the front end nodes. Currently, I know in the past we've used like NFS and things like that, and we kind of cringe to that stuff. And then, can you kind of tell me how you would see the evolution of shared storage in particular now that we have real, quote unquote, real storage as a first citizen in Juju stuff in there? But I never got the impression that was a very reliable or even good idea, even though
There's nothing actually wrong with using NFS to do a shared file storage, especially NFS 4 is quite robust and can model this kind of scale out file sharing system architecture. But to answer your question, this is still very much just modeling storage at the unit level. My unit needs a block device or it needs a file system, and allowing the operator to define what that means in the cloud they're deploying. Does that mean EVS volume? Does it mean a block device? I forget what Amazon calls their block device stuff, but this opens the door to potentially share storage or elastic file systems across multiple points. Those all just kind of become plugins for that. So while it's not modeled like that currently, there's a potential to move in that direction as we kind of spend time designing and getting feedback from users on that stuff.
Right. So in other words, coordinate charms and whatnot would just utilize this storage directly.
NFS would ask for a file system, and as NFS scaled out, it would you still have to figure out a way to sync between them, but they could then be the abstraction layer for that model so that you could do shared storage. NFS would have a block device that it asks for, and then the relation would still do NFS mounting for the charm. So the charms, if they needed a shared file storage, would have to use something like either an object store like Ceph for that access, or a charm like NFS.
Okay. Do you know offhand what the NFS charm does today? Does it just grab whatever's on the local unit, or?
So it hasn't modeled storage in the NFS charm, but that's one of the charms that are prime for sure.
Okay.
Same with the Ceph charm as well. It makes the user enter in the block devices. Going forward, the Ceph charm would simply need to say, I need block devices, and then the charm would give it to them, and the user could supply how that block device is presented to them. So that makes a much better and stronger story at the end of the day.
Sure. And next I want to ask you a little bit about actions, if that's all right. So in the past, we've had a command called Juju run, which was basically Juju run, and then either against a service or a unit, I could run arbitrary commands. Actions, to me, like an extension of that. So can you kind of explain the evolution there? Like, what can I do with actions that I couldn't do with run before, and how is it cleaner than it is before? If you could just give me some examples of how you're...
So basically what actions are, and to quote one of the authors of the code that added actions to core, actions only typed Juju run. So what action gives you is it gives you a way to do validation of the input you're supplying with you, and it gives you a mechanism back to the user. So before Juju run was synchronous, you run Juju run, the command executes, and then it reports back the results for you, and it came back as standard out essentially of that command that you run. When you have actions, instead what you do is you have an action that's defined. It correlates to a script that can be executed, just like a hook inside of the charm, and then you define a list of parameters as a JSON schema, or as these parameters, which are these types. Juju does front-end validation for that, and then the action hook that runs on the other end has the ability to do action set and action get parameters, set parameters, and then an action fail to fail an action with a string of why that failed. Actions will run asynchronously, and you can actually make them run asynchronously, or you can make them wait and synchronously as well. So block just like they do now, but they also run asynchronously, which models that very nicely and is in line with the rest of what Juju does.
Okay, give me some example charms here. I'm trying to think of as you talk about all these great features, everyone's going to wonder where they can see examples of this. And I know you're using the actions somewhere in some charms.
Yeah, so we, alongside some of the core guys that have been working on action, and Adam, and we've been modeling them, and we've been run benchmarking on a service. So what we've really just an action working with the actions guys, and we've now written a bunch of benchmarks for charms that will be landing in the charm store, the example of actions, but also hash marks for your workload. This is particularly interesting. If you're deploying a workload, you can run a benchmark. You can tune the workload, benchmark again that it did something good. Add an additional service like caching for Memcache, benchmark again, validate results. So we find that repeatability, that reliability, and that repeatability of benchmarks modeled as actions is a really strong story for charm authors who want to be able to get the most use and mileage out of their workload, which falls all back onto that standard, invest the time to write a really good charm, and you can use it everywhere you go. And having actions, which are benchmarks for that charm, as one example of actions, really strengthens the actual value of that code and the time you invested.
What about storage? Have any example storage things yet? Although I did remember James Page saying that the Ceph charm would be probably one of the first ones to start to leverage storage.
Charms are the first one to grow storage, and probably MySQL as well. You'll see those kind of really core charms of things that connect to a lot of things. Postgres, most database charms, Ceph as an object store, and even the OpenStack charms start to grow that capability first. So I would imagine probably should just highlight those as they do land. This now has actions, or this now has storage.
Right. And as far as leader elections, who do you anticipate will be some of the first charms to really take advantage of that? I'd really like to see maybe Postgres or one of those.
Cassandra being one.
Cassandra is a great example of one that needs to maintain kind of leaders. The OpenStack charms will definitely grow that. They're very interested. The OpenStack guys, Postgres author, all these guys have actually charm helper. So I imagine every charm that has the leader elections code from charm helpers imported will immediately start using this instead. It's a much more stronger, much more reliable, a much smarter and more robust way to model leadership than what was currently being used.
I also see on Juju 123, moving on to new features. Any other comments on those features before we move on from anybody actually, or any questions from IRC? Support for Google Cloud Engine is finally here. I've not had a chance to try this yet. Have any of you guys messed with it though? The config looks very simple. I should actually today, I think.
Yeah, bootstrapped a couple days. A very straightforward example. I'm very excited to start spinning up some workloads onto this.
Yeah. Okay. No, I haven't tried it. I definitely would like to.
Yeah, it's
because it defaults to US Central, and that's like SystemD in Juju, which is interesting because you need Vivid, a newer Ubuntu, in order to use Systemd. However, our charms only support LTS releases, so unless you're running your own private charm or running on non-LTS releases, this probably won't affect anybody until Solar 4, which is fine. That gives us plenty of time. All these little bugs and things like that. So, just a question for you charmers out there: How often are your charms interacting with, say, Upstart in your trusty and precise terms. I would assume quite a bit, right, when you're restarting services and whatnot.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of charms. The project done in Kubernetes, which has an Upstart files that are written, I think we'll need to move those to System D once we get that feature. And but that won't 1604, right? That's the next LTS.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's another year before we do that. We've had a meeting about 1604 and what we need to
restart, which
yep.
which should work. Start.
Right. Some charms actually write the Upstart file though, so we'll have to.
Right. The Ubuntu wiki that says it's called Systemd for Upstart authors, which has a way you can convert your Upstart scripts that you've written that are custom to Systemd. I haven't tried it yet, but it looks pretty straightforward.
Excellent. New style restore. I guess we can back up. We can restore backups now. No. I mean, Beans Core is taking the backup role there, and so we don't really need the Juju backup plugin anymore. Correct?
Yeah, the backup plugin was separate from Core.
Right.
It existed. It was deployed with the environment, so it's become more robust. It's part of Core, and there's now actually a restore command as well. This is just to restore state and not data. I believe that if you model storage in your charm, it'll do its attempts to reconnect the storage for each unit that was provided that initially. Right. So that's another strong case for why you'd want to have storage and networking.
Probably something interesting we should mention in the release notes is how backups. So obviously, I mean, in his really just the state of the state server, but it would be interesting to know exactly how much of the data modeling and whatnot, right? Because to me, if backups handle that, then I would be really motivated to start modeling storage in Juju, right? If I
realize I may have spoken a little too ambitiously about it, so I need to validate that. But on the Juju mailing list,
that's just fine. It should be clear to people, what exactly it's restoring here. Also, do we remove the backups plugin from GitHub? Because we should probably get rid of that.
So actually something that was installed alongside of Core. The backup plugin was rewritten to do the proper degradation. So if you're on an older version of Juju, it'll use the proper Juju backup command.
That is really sweet. That is perfect. Thank you. All right. Next note he has improved proxy support for restrictive networks. Basically, this is just fixing a bunch of bugs. So HTTP proxy, HTTPS proxies, or whatever, now get properly propagated to all the machines. So before you would set it into the config file, only that node would follow those snippets, and then you'd have machines that didn't know that there was a proxy server, and it was just kind of messy. That is all fixed now. The Juju run command will also use proxy settings as well as debug hooks and anything the charm runs. So that's for actions, but I'm assuming since the actions are being run inside the unit in a hook context, then that should work. Why it wouldn't? Yeah, sounds good to me. Next, new block messages. I actually don't understand what this means here. You can okay, this is to block people from destroying an environment. So you can add a message. If the person doesn't type in that exact string, then I blocks. Yeah, that's kind of confusing for me. I don't know about this feature at all, so I'm going to have to read up on that one.
To make sure that you don't accidentally destroy
it. Yeah. But that's pretty interesting. Leader elections we already kind of talked about. That's, of course, marked as experimental, and people have been looking forward to it for a while. Another one, addressable LXC and KVM instances on AWS and MAS. Can you explain this one a little bit to me?
Yeah, so what you get from is that there is a bit of an addressability issue in containers in general, where they are only network-wise onto the unit you're deployed on teams without an additional star to do that. In Maz and Amazon, you'll be able to have networking and addressability across containers in multiple nodes. So if you deploy to an Alexi container on machine 1 and a KVM machine on a KVM container on machine 2, you can have a relation between those two services, and they'll be able to communicate.
Whereas before they were kind of isolated, and that was kind of a bummer of a limitation. So, kind of a loaded question here. Am I out of excuses for not to always just deploy in a container?
Well, if you're on Maz or Amazon, you're kind of running out of reasons, unless the surface you're modeling is something like Hadoop, where it really requires. Otherwise, it's generally speaking a good idea to just model an easier way to reuse machines quicker.
Right. So especially for Maz users, I would say, where you can get that density. Is there a way, just thinking off the top of my head here, is there a way to just automatically make had a mass deployment at work or something? Is there a way to just make it always by default without being explicit, or?
I was to say not currently, but I'm not quite sure the answer to that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just running out of excuses. So, and that's pretty much it for Juju 123. I mean, that kind of covers all of the major features there. This is a really big release. I'm really looking forward to.
Hey George, there's something I'd like to add that actually was released in 122, but I don't think it was covered very well or very prominently exposed to people. One of the things that landed is the new status output, and there's been a lot of polish that went into this, and it's such a small thing that impacts Juju in such a huge way. Well, you get a YAML output, so I'm going to run that right now, and you can see that you get this nice long output of YAML. And what's interesting to me is that it's difficult for me to start parsing once I get a ton of services. So if I were to run Juju status with this flag, tac format equals one line. Now, this is just one small example of what's landed. We have a very watchable, condensed output of what's going on in my environment. But this is not where we stopped. Atco landed another feature, which I like to call battle station mode, and it's very watchable. And I'm going to actually pipe this through watch. Juju status, tac format equals tabular. And what this does is this is going to give me the battlefield view of what's going on in my deployment. I get everything from machines to services right down into the unit view. And it gives me everything that I want from the version of the agent that's running on the host, the open ports, which machine it's deployed to, as well as the IP address and the service, whether it's exposed or not. It's everything that you would see in that YAML format, condensed in a very watchable manner.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And from what I understand, this will also land as default in 124.
That's excellent. Bruiser's asking where he can find a paste for the. I'm gonna paste those.
So George, I saw that you were reading them off of an email, but for others that are watching this later.
In fact,
I did paste those in the IRC room already.
You just search for Juju release notes in Google. It'll take you right to the page. And Curtis does a really good job of making that very detailed. I glossed over some of the more esoteric ones, but he gives a list of like every single bug fix for every release. So that's
okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no worries. So that's basically all that's in Juju 123. That kind of covers a lot, but I want to, since I've got Bruiser here, I wanted to kind of, because we only have about 15, 20 minutes left, kind of get us up to speed. A little while ago, people asking about like what's up with Docker integration. Do I have to choose one or both with Juju? I'm really kind of confused. Like, where you read Docker, there's a bunch of others where you see Juju fitting and how we can help people with those problems. And since I have all three of you guys here, I figured you could spend a few minutes explaining to us how you and Swarm and all these goodies to Juju users. Kind of give us a state of the art of where you see.
Well, we already had a container story already. The one you get with Docker.
Right.
So we're similar to sort of a virtualization story where it provides you with a machine-like unit. You can SSH in, you can build things, you can sort of operate. Docker is much more of an image-based workflow. You run your Docker, ready to go. You're less messing with it. So what Workspace work for give you kind of a nice solution that is sort of idiomatic way and kind of gets you up and going. But then you hook up some things like networking, and we've actually made it so we can run Kubernetes on top of that or Swarm on top of that, so you can get some cluster. And we have plans to kind of expand this out, storage support and other things. So looking for partners out there who are interested in, we've got a charm for flannel, but there could be very easy same interface as plain. Juju is for the Docker ecosystem because there are so many different options, a lot more problems, and try them out, see what works. We hope to get people contributing back what they find works best, and actually sort of charms. So if you're getting started with Docker, I would start with
Yeah, and Chuck is really chomping at the bit to actually screen share and show all this goodness.
Yeah, do you want to show some stuff?
A deployment of our Kubernetes stack where we've merged the two ecosystems. It's Kubernetes bolted on top of Docker, and I think here, what's nice about this is that we do have individual components that can now interchange. So if I were to deploy Docker and I say I want a Weave SDN, I simply deploy the Weave charm, drag a relationship. It's going to reconfigure the networking for it, Docker charm, and boom, we've reconfigured. At the moment, this is all hypothetical. The Weave charm doesn't exist. So, but this is how we're building it. It's all modular, so we can start dissecting it and empower you to move as fast as your company's needs are. Like you hear that now benchmarks over X service is greater than Y. You can get out there, you can validate this information, and you can start checking out these components yourself. On top of this, we're also in Kubernetes. This is a deployment of the 0.15.0, which is currently in RC mode. Google is sprinting right now to try to get to 1.0, and we're trying to track that very closely so that we're in alignment with them whenever they release. Outside of that, we've also got Etsy, which is doing the flannel. And what's not pictured here, unfortunately, is Swarm, which is another orchestrator that we're working on and trying to get landed in the charms.
Okay. When you guys anticipate, like you say, upstream is driving towards 1.0. After they release, let's say in the next few weeks or so, when do you guys anticipate all these sets of charms to kind of be, I don't want to say production ready, but 1.0 ready? When.
Well, we hope that I think there's been a large in Kubernetes, and so now that we're tracking it, we hope to be basically released. We should be able to release charms that work with that.
Okay.
We depend on, we're tracking them, so that. Right. But I feel pretty good about it.
Is there anything else over there in Docker land that you guys want to talk about, or?
Well,
you just hop down and skate,
Yeah, people who are so for people who are charming or wanting to try Juju, we have a couple nice Docker containers for them. We have Juju Box, which allows you to basically spin up a working install without actually needing to install it on your system. A CentOS box or a Debian box, it's not going to be easy to install. And it also gives you a way to kind of like quickly try out Juju and throw it away. We install Juju Quick Deployer, so if you want to deploy a bundle or if you want to like deploy a few charms,